Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, which means another episode of the Iron Purpose podcast has just dropped, and this is episode 29. Hard to believe, but we are just cranking these things out, and got another special one for you today. Today's episode features Matt Luitjens. He is the captain and jail administrator for Redwood County, and he's also involved with the MSA, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, in training. And one of the trainings he does is use of force / defensive tactics instructor courses, and I got the opportunity to go attend his training a few weeks ago, where he and Jason Volkers, previous guest of mine a couple episodes back, were instructing myself and a group of other officers. In this episode, we talk about Matt's career, kind of from where it started to where he's at right now, including some ups and downs with his family, adversities that they've had to face, and how he's been able to overcome them and rely on his family, his wife, his kids, and his faith to get him through those times. It was a super special conversation. I learned a lot from it, and I filled up my notebook, a lot of things that I'm going to apply to my life immediately. Definitely thankful for this man and the work that he's doing and the work that he will continue to do. So this is the Iron Purpose Podcast, episode 29, featuring Matt Luitjens. Stay sharp, everybody. We are back, and with me today I have Matt. Do you go by Matt or Matthew?
Matt, please.
Right.
Matthew, if I'm
Matt
in trouble.
Luitjens. Well, you're not going to be in trouble on here at all. If anything, it might be vice versa. I appreciate you coming on here, man. It's with your background, I'm excited to kind of get into a conversation about the career field that we are in. You have a little more experience, obviously, than I do with it, and how you've kind of worked your way up. And then I've heard you got some good stories. I got the opportunity to interview Jason, one of your counterparts when it comes to training, and he had nothing but great things to say about you. And after the fact, he's like, "Hey, you really gotta try to get him on." I'm like, all right, man, I'm emailing him right now. So
you say counterpart, I say mentor. He's a salt of the earth, man. Love that man.
Yeah, very very wise, very just awesome guy to talk to. And he's just a joy to be around. And I can see why you'd want to try to be a mentee of his.
Yep.
But we met a couple weeks ago in the same place that I met Jason, up in Duluth. I got the opportunity to be a use of force instructor for my county, the Crown County Jail, and I needed to go to training for that. So I went up to Duluth. My sergeant got me signed up, and yourself and Jason were there, put on a awesome instructing course for us. And when both of you were up there, like, you were just so professional with what you did, and I could really tell that you guys took it another level. It was more than just a career; it was more than just a job for you. And if I remember correctly, you weren't even getting paid to be up there. It was out of your own time to be up there to train us. Is that correct?
It is. So I'm a salaried employee, so the MSA does not pay me to go up there. I basically take time out of work. The MSA then gives training hours to my work, so I can then send my staff to get trained. So I personally don't get trained, but my county does benefit, and then my staff benefits kind of along that same line.
Absolutely. Cool. But yeah, you were awesome instructors, and you can tell when it means more to somebody than just you're just getting a paycheck. You really have a lot of passion, and I feel like there's a lot of purpose behind it. So appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on here, man.
Thanks for having me.
What you been up to since last time I saw you?
At work, I mean, it's kind of nonstop. Even as an administrator, you're always working, right? Try and etch out as much family time as you can, but nothing real spectacular since then. We got some camping trips coming up with the wife and some friends, and I'm looking forward to those and kind of getting through.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe it's already almost the 4th of July weekend.
Almost July. Crazy.
We blink and it's already almost over.
Right. We've only had two hot days this year. It's all been raining and chilly. So.
And the 2 hot days we had were freaking
insanely
90 degrees. Go outside and almost melt.
Right.
Yeah, and then rain. Did you guys get hit by any of the storms that just went through?
Yeah, we do. We got quite a bit of rain. Nothing, no damage down here, which is good. But we got quite a bit of rain and some pretty good winds. But nothing, no damage to us, which is good.
Good. Good to hear. Well, kind of like we talked about beforehand, I'm going to give you the floor now just to kind of share your story, and kind of talk about what you do. And like I said, essentially, how you went from from growing up, how you became the person that you are today, maybe some of the adversities and the triumphs and maybe the hills and the valleys kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so with
Uh,
that, take it away, man.
yeah. I'll kind of start now and kind of work backwards if that's all right.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So I'm currently Redwood County Jail Administrator. I've been here since July of 2021. So I'm coming up on my 4-year mark, which is kind of hard to believe too. Prior to that, I spent about a little over 14 years in Scott County, Shakopee. I started there as a corrections officer, became their training officer, became a sergeant, became their training sergeant. Made my way. I became their. I kind of started their CERT team, their corrections emergency response team. I started that. I was their first commander for that. Got that team up and running before I left. Prior to corrections, I spent 10 years in the Army, which I think
Mm.
I joined that when I was 17. I had a couple of deployments. I think that's kind of what was the beginning of shaping kind of who I am. Um, Met and married probably the best thing that ever happened to me. She about whatever the military didn't form me into, she definitely did. Was my best friend. I thank God every day for her. Raised 3 amazing boys. Again, those the peaks and the valleys you talked about earlier, definitely had some of those with our family upbringing. But yeah, so I started in Scott County in June of 2007. Um, so right before that, I was making countertops. I was making Cambria countertops, those quartz kind of whatever countertops, just mindless grunt work, making $11 an hour. Um, I applied actually in Blue Earth County in 2006. I applied in Blue Earth County and Scott County at the same time, and I went through kind of all of the stuff with Blue Earth County. I applied to be their corrections officer and a 911 dispatcher at the same time.
Mm.
Um, I got interviews in both. I tested on both. I scored with my veterans preference points 100 out of 100 for both of them. So they said to me, which one would you prefer? I said, yeah, let me try corrections, right? So I go through that. I get in the background, and they don't select me, which is fine. So prior to not being selected, so on Monday, Blue Earth calls me and says, "Hey, we want to put you in background." Tuesday, Scott County calls me and says, "Hey, we want to put you in background." And I said, "I'm already in Blue Earth, but thank you. No, thank you." Well, then Blue Earth doesn't take me. So I go another year making countertops. It was just about a year to the day later where Scott County called back and they're like, "Hey, you applied last year. We're still looking. Do you have any interest?" Well, yeah, I kind of have interest, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
go and I interview and I do all the stuff and they offer me a position. So I come home and I pull my family aside and I said, we have to have a discussion. Uh, so I got this job offer. There's pros and cons to it. It's quite a significant pay raise. However, I'll be working weekends, overnights, overtime, holidays. You'll see me a lot less, but we'll have more money to do, kind of the fun things in life.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest at the time, he was probably like 7 or 8, without missing a beat, says, "No, go ahead and take it. We don't need to see you that much." Yeah. Hey, thanks, bud. Humbling at that point, right? So I take the job and I go to Scott County and um, I had a little bit of chip on my shoulder that Blue Earth didn't want me, right? Which is
Mm.
fine. That's no big deal. So at Scott County, me personally, I give it my all. It's kind of how I am. Everything I do, I give it my all. I want to be the best at what I'm doing, right?
Mm.
At least my best, not maybe the best. Anyway, so I'm doing that. At about my 9-month mark, I'm not even off probation yet. And they came to me and they said, "Hey, we like what you're doing. We want you to become what's called a left in charge officer. So when there's no sergeant on duty, you're running the jail." And I'm like, "I'm not even off probation yet. You want me to do what?" They're like, "Yeah, we want you to run the jail." I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Right? So I do that. And then a couple months later, I become a field training officer. About 2009, 2010-ish, I become the training officer, which, full disclosure, the reason I wanted to become a training officer was to get off the floor. I wanted to get out of the housing units away from inmates a little bit more. It's kind of a selfish thing on my part. But I kind of was at 3 years. Yeah, right. I mean, at 3 years, I was kind of at the point where I'm like, I don't really know what I want to do anymore. So I become a training officer, and I dive headfirst into that. And 2011, 2012, I got promoted to sergeant in Scott County, so shift supervisor. And they said, well, you can stay on as training and just become a training sergeant at that point. That's perfect. So at the time, the training portion was kind of hit or miss. Like it was there, but it wasn't really kind of formalized yet. And I said, like, I found these trainings I want to go to. I want to become an instructor so I can come back and teach our staff. It's through the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. Mm-hmm. They said, yeah, do what you got to do. So I went to these trainings, and I became a certified instructor for the MSA. And at the time, I was certified to teach 7 courses. And I won't go through them all because it's too long of a list. But it was basically the entire corrections academy that they had started, minus direct supervision and interpersonal communication skills. So the rest of the academy I could teach. And that's what I did. I became an instructor for all of that. And they said, well, there's a catch. If you do this, if you become an instructor for us, we may want to task you to teach at the academy. I'm okay with it. So I go back to my supervisors, and they're like, yeah, just do, that's fine. Do what you got to do. So I become instructor for all those things. I went and I taught one class, and I had 2 guys approach me, one from Stearns and one from Sherburne, very good friends of mine to this day. And they said, hey, we want you to be on the jail standardized training committee. And I said, cool. What the hell is that? Right?
Yeah,
explain to me what's going on with this. And they said, we want to get standardized training throughout the state of Minnesota. We want to get instructors that can come in and teach the same courses to everyone that comes in. And I'm like, that's great. Yeah, I'm in. Put me in. So they did. And I started teaching the academy in 2011. I think was my first academy. And I've been training with them ever since, which is where I met Jason. He and I have been teaching DT together since 2012, I think it was. So it was about, 13, 14 years. I shouldn't say we've been teaching together that long. I've been sitting and watching him teach since 2011, 2012. He finally let me get off the bench a few years later, come in and help a little bit. I'll never forget. We're sitting there one day, and he's like, "Hey, next academy, you wanna help me?" And I was like, "Yes." When Yoda asks, "You want to help?" You say yes, right? And I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "I don't like teaching, whatever the portion was. Can you pick that up?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that just kind of started, the DT with Jay and I. And so throughout my career in Scott County, teaching DT, twice a year up there at the academy. And then they start throwing in the T for T's. So now I'm doing, 2 times a year for DT or the academy, plus once, sometimes twice a year for the T for T stuff. And my bosses were like, "Hey, we're getting stretched kind of thin with you doing this. So you can't just, yes, automatically agree. You have to approve it through administration." And I was like, all right. I think they told me no twice. You can't, we just can't send you up there. Right. Mm-hmm. And I get that, especially where I'm at now, I understand the staffing levels and you got to have people. And
right.
At the time, I don't think I really understood it, but where I'm at now, I totally understand it. And then, I in my mind, I'm positioning myself to be, kind of the best of who I could be, right? So Blue Earth County, they built a new jail. It was back in 2015, I think it was. State-of-the-art facility. It's phenomenal. If you haven't been there, I highly suggest you go and take a tour.
I've not. I would like to.
Yeah, you should, yeah. Anyway, so they came up to Scott County, and they said, hey, we want to shadow you guys. Show us what your jail is and how you run things and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Cool. So they come up, and we're showing them around. And I was happened to be in booking one day, and one of the people came up and she's like, "Yeah, I know you." And I was like, maybe. And she's like, "Did you interview with us?" "Yeah, I interviewed with you guys, a couple of years ago, whatever it was." And she's like, "Why didn't you choose us?" And, that chip on my shoulder, I said, "Well, I chose you. You didn't choose me." And she's like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why didn't we choose you?" And I'm like, I didn't want to get into it, whatever the reasoning was, it's bygones, whatever.
Right.
So I kind of got that little bit of chip off my shoulder when she's like, we should have chose you. And I was like, well, it all worked. It worked out great for me. I'm glad you didn't, to be quite honest, right? Um, you know, um, so I'm in Scott County, and I was your typical yes man, right? You want someone to work overtime? That's me. You want someone to cover this shift? That's me. You want someone to do this? That's me. I'm your guy, right? And it really unintentionally, I put my family on the back burner, and I shouldn't have done that, right? But live and learn. In my mind, my family was kind of suffering at me trying to become who I wanted to be. They were kind of suffering at me not being home, right? Missing the holidays and the birthdays and the whatever trips you have, I just can't go because I'm working. And kind of rewind a little bit, tell you a bit about my family.
Yeah.
So I married my wife in 1999. We married just over 26 years, just celebrated 26 years.
Wow.
Which I don't know. I'm gonna put her in for sainthood because putting up with me for that long, I don't know how she's done it. But we had
Congrats on that. That's
yeah,
awesome,
thanks, man. So I had my oldest son, my high school sweetheart, and my wife basically came into his life when he was less than 6 months old. So has been a second mom to him his entire life. And then her and I have two sons together. Well, our youngest son was born with cerebral palsy, so he's been in a wheelchair his whole life. Can't use his legs, doesn't have use of one arm. But cognitively, mentally, the kid is sharp as a tack. He's smarter than most people I know, and it's kind of annoying sometimes how smart he is. I'll be honest. He puts me on my place quite a bit. So we kind of grew up as a family with a little bit of struggle, right? Getting him up to Shriners and up to Gillette's to have surgeries and to have fittings for his braces and to get wheelchairs and all that kind of stuff. Kind of puts it into kind of perspective at a very young age. We were married to 3 kids at 22, right? I don't recommend that to anybody. It worked out well for us, but I don't recommend that. Anyway, we kind of joked when we first had kids, like we're married at 3 kids at 22. Well, by 40, they'll be 18 and out of the house, right? That's just kind of how it worked in our head. So our whole plan was, we'll be empty nesters by 40, right? Well, I mean, man, you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plan, right? Because that's not how the plan went anytime after that. I'm pushing 50 and the kids are still living with us, which is, I love it. It's fantastic. But anyway, so a little bit fast forward, and now I'm working in Scott County, and I'm the go-to guy for everything, right? And 2014 hits, and I'm going to apologize, Bailey, real quick. I'm going to get a little bit emotional. So just bear with me if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
2014 hits, February to be exact. And my middle son comes home and he tells my wife, I got a stomach ache. He's 14 years old, and she says, go to the bathroom, you're fine, go, whatever. So he does, and goes to bed that night. Next day he comes back and says, "Mom, I don't feel good. I want to go to the doctor." And for him to say that was kind of a big deal because he didn't go to doctors, didn't like doctors, that kind of thing. So she took him in. This was on a Tuesday. By Friday, we had been to our 3rd hospital. He had been hooked up to more machines than I can count. And by Saturday, he was at the University of Minnesota. Now it's the Masonic Children's Hospital. And he was listed on a heart transplant list. And you go from a Tuesday to a Saturday. It's kind of a kick in the gut. And so I call my boss and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to need some days off. And he literally said to me, "Do what you have to do. We'll make it work." Awesome. 169 days later, I'm still not at work. I took 7 months off of work, and everyone in Scott County, and I love them to death to this day, donated time so I got paid. I didn't have to take unpaid leave. I mean, I got chills, man. It's
Yeah, me too.
everyone in that county was unbelievable. We went through some real tough times. The lowest of the lows, the deepest valley, as you alluded to earlier, was on a Tuesday when the doctors came in and they said, we're going to make your son as comfortable as possible. And I said, oh, Doc, I don't know what that means. Like, dumb it down for me because I'm not a real smart man. And she said, we think he'll be brain dead by Friday. So they gave my son 3 days to live, right? So we go back that night to the Ronald McDonald houses where we were staying and didn't get much sleep. A lot of tears, a lot of crying. Woke up the next morning and I was taking a shower. And like, I cried in the shower because no one can see tears in the shower. And I said, Lord, I give you my son. Do with him what you want, but I'm asking you to give him more time. Make him a beacon of your hope, right? My wife and I walk in the hospital that next morning and not a lot of hope in us. Heads are down, hearts are even lower. Turn the corner to the hospital, or the hallway he was in, and there's a gaggle of doctors. Not a technical term, it's what I call it. It's a gaggle of doctors. And they're all kind of outside of his room. And my heart sank, like it hit the floor. Because I knew my son was dead, right? And we turned the corner, and his doctor looks at us, and she says, I don't know what happened. When you talk about long-term recovery as opposed to certain death. I said, I don't understand. And she said, we don't either. But he's responding, and he's going to make it.
Wow.
So we are 11 years, almost to the day. My son had a heart transplant. That's what saved his life. We're almost 11 years to the day, and he's still here. He's walking, talking, annoying, everything, right? I love every minute of it, right? But that day changed me as an employee, as a man. I was no longer the yes man. You need something done? Ask everybody before you ask me, because I'm going home to my family. That's where my heart is now. And that's how I look at stuff now. I used to, leave early and come home late to work. Man, I'm going in late and coming home early now. I do, like I said, I'm salary, so I technically I'm paid for 40 hours a week, and that's all I put in. And that might not be the best way to look at it. I don't care, man. I'm coming home to my wife and my kids every night, and I love spending time with them. And I know I asked you earlier today if we could push this back a couple hours, and I don't have a good excuse. My excuse is my wife played softball and I wanted to go watch her. I'm her biggest cheerleader when I'm out there, and it's so every
That's
chance I get
rough.
to stand in her corner and cheer her on, I do it.
Yes, sir.
So I teach a wellness class at the academy, and I'll just touch on it a little bit here. I don't want to get too in the weeds on it. But I talk a lot about who's your Mount Rushmore of people. If I were to ask you, Bailey, and don't answer, you don't have to answer. Close your eyes and think of 1, 2, or 10 people that when you make a decision, they're in the front of your mind, right? Who are you thinking of when I say, when you do things, who do you do them for? Me, it's my wife and my 3 sons. So my Mount Rushmore is literally my wife and my 3 kids. And every decision I make, they're at the forefront of my mind, And I say to everybody, the question I was always asked when my son was in the hospital is, how do you do it? I can't imagine taking 7 months off of work, and how did you do it? But then you ask those same people, like, what would you do for your kids, or for your family, or for your Mount Rushmore? Well, I would do anything. Then you shouldn't ask me how I did it. Because if you're willing to do anything, you'll do anything and everything, right? So I always ask them like, hey, okay, so for your Mount Rushmore, would you die for them? Everybody, oh yeah, absolutely. I'd die for my wife. I'd die for my kids. Would you kill for them? Absolutely, I would. Without a question. I'll kill for you. You mess with my family, and I'm coming at you both barrels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I ask them, would you live for them?
Whoa.
Would you live for your Mount Rushmore? Like, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is, when you come home from work, do you leave work at work, or you bring it home and you take it out on your wife and kids? When you come home after a bad day, do you separate work from home, and do you do stuff with your family, or do you sit in your recliner with a beer or a whiskey to get through the rest of that day, to mentally process that? If you come home and you sit in your recliner or on your couch, or in your comfortable spot with a beer or whatever, are you living for your Mount Rushmore? And I'll argue you're not. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else, because I have my bad days and I come home and I get in my recliner and that's it. Like I need to just decompress. But I'm my challenge to everybody is don't do that, right? A mentor of mine actually told me one time, when I'm driving to work, I get a halfway point. So I'm going to work, I get to that halfway point. From home to that halfway point, I'm thinking family. Once I hit that halfway point, I'm no longer thinking family, and I'm preparing for work. Excuse me. When I'm coming home, I'm thinking of work until I get to that halfway point. Once I hit that halfway point, I'm no longer thinking of work. I'm thinking of family. And when I get home, what am I going to do? How am I going to live for my Mount Rushmore, right? I'm blessed. When I was in Scott County, I had an hour drive, 1 hour door to door. So I got 30 minutes to think about family, going to work, and then I get my halfway point, and I was preparing for work. And then I got a half an hour to decompress before I was thinking of family on the way home. And now I've got about an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. So I got a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I still have 35, 40 minutes where when I leave home, I'm thinking of family until I get to my halfway point. Once I hit that halfway point, I put my family away. I bring out work, and it's work until I'm at that halfway point coming home. And I'd like to think that I've improved in that. I can't really guarantee that. My wife may differ a little bit, but what does she know, right? Um, she's listening, in case you're wondering. But anyway, so I started out very much as a company man, and I'm very much today the exact opposite. My switch from Scott County to Redwood County, I'll touch on this a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
So I positioned myself in my mind to be their jail administrator in Scott County. That was my entire goal from day one, and I never hit it. I never once wavered from my goal is to be the administrator in Scott County, right? So I make sergeant, I make shift supervisor. Fantastic. I'm on pace. And the administrator at the time retired, so the assistant gets promoted. There's an opening for the assistant jail administrator. Well, who better than me, in my mind, right? So I applied, go through the process. There's 4 of us that applied. And the problem, I guess if you want to call it that, and it's a good problem that they have, is any one of the 4 that applied could have done the job extremely well. I take nothing away from the other 3. I think they're all good friends of mine, even to this day. And any one of us that would have gotten it would have done phenomenal. Go through the process, and I don't get it. I don't get selected. The person that got it was another instructor with me. He was another DT instructor. He was on the CERT team with me. Mine and his career were parallels. And to this, I think he's doing a great job over there still. So I go to my debrief, or whatever you want to call it, where they say, hey, if you want to come and talk about why you didn't get selected, come and talk. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. Please let me know. So I get in there, and I'm talking to the administrator, the incoming administrator. And he says, Matt, he said, you're the face of our organization, right? Which I took to heart. Like that was a big compliment to me.
Mm.
And he said, you can do anything you want in this organization. And I looked at him and he said, well, except get promoted again, basically. And I understand that. I'm not, I don't, I don't dig on him. I don't dig on the organization at all. Uh, I just wasn't the right fit, and I understand that. And so the outgoing administrator, who I had really good rapport with, he said, and I hadn't thought about it until he said it, so I can blame him for this. He said, Matt, I hope you take your skills elsewhere. Go to another county, be an administrator. I had never thought about leaving Scott County until that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get selected, and I get this thank you, no thank you interview, and take your skills elsewhere. This was in February, 2021. My wife does taxes, so January through April 15th, she's super busy. I hardly ever see her, so I don't get it, and I'm in my own feels. I'm in my own head. Like, what could I have done different? What could I do? Why wasn't I selected? It was a big woe is me time for me, and I was in my own head quite a bit to the point where I looked up. So the way the schedules worked back then, I happened to have 6 consecutive days off, where I didn't have to use PTO. I just had
Mm-hmm.
6 consecutive days off, and I had found a round trip air ticket to Phoenix, Arizona. It was like $59 or something like that, super cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And I found an Airbnb for $29 a night. So for less than $200, I was going to go to Phoenix for 6 days, right? Didn't tell my wife. She's busy working. I'm not going to bother her with this. So I don't book it, but I eventually, before I book it, I talk to her, and she's like, "Well, why am I not invited?" I said, "Well, it's your busy time. I'm not going to bother you with, me being in my own feels." And to her credit, she kind of knew where my head was at and didn't like it. She said, "I want to go with," and I said, "I don't want you to go with. I'm good." And she said, "I don't like that answer, and I'm not going to let you go by yourself." Well, reflecting now, X amount of years later, my intention was to go to Phoenix, and I talk about this in that wellness class too. My intention was to go to Phoenix and drink them out of alcohol. I'm not going to lie. Like, that was my whole goal, my whole drown my sorrows, BS, woe is me, boo hoo. I was going to go to Phoenix, and I was just going to drink for 6 days straight. And I don't know if she knew that or not, but she basically said, if you're going, I'm going, which put a damper on my whole plan. So I didn't go, right? And I blamed it on her, and it was her fault I didn't get to go, and yada yada. And she probably, well, not probably, she was right. 100% she was right.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about in corrections. The only people that have a higher suicide rate than corrections are combat vets. So veterans that have seen actual combat, right? Other than that, it's us, and that's a scary thought to think of. And
Mm.
the alcoholism that comes with our profession and the divorce rate that comes with our profession are profound. And that's one thing I try to talk about in this wellness class is we have a hard enough job, a hard enough go at it without getting on our own ways. We trip ourselves by coming home and sitting in our recliners and cracking a beer or a whiskey and looking at our wives and saying, "You have no idea what I'm going through. I'm not going to talk to you about it." You would never understand where I'm at mentally, right? And that's BS. That's a cop out in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because my wife is very well attuned to what's going on, and I talk to her quite a bit about everything. So I got my own feels. I said, fine, if I'm not going to go drink Phoenix dry, I'm going to look for a new job. And she said, what do you mean? So I went on Indeed.com, not a plug for them, just where I went. And I said, I want to be a jail administrator. And I'm looking at Southern Minnesota and North Carolina, because we had wanted to retire in North Carolina when we retire.
Sure.
So I put it out there. and I get a hit from Asheville, North Carolina. They want you to be a corrections officer 2, which is a fancy term to say you're going to sit in a housing unit with 1,500 inmates, making $21 an hour. I
What?
said, thank you, but no thank you. I want no part of this. I'll stay where I'm at in Scott County. Well, then I get a hit that said, hey, Redwood County is looking for an administrator. And I was like, cool. So I Googled where the hell is Redwood County, because I had no idea. I'll be honest. I had no clue where it was at on a map. I go and I interview. I actually was at the academy when I had my interview. Came down from Ripley down to Redwood Falls, interviewed, and then drove back to Ripley. And by the time I got back to Ripley, I had a phone call from the chief deputy, and he said, we want to offer you the job. And I said, that's fantastic, chief, but I got a couple of questions. And he's like, yeah, what are your questions? I said, starting pay, is it negotiable? And he said, it is, but I'm just going to start at the top of the box. I'm not going to mess around. I want you to come in here and work. So we're going to offer you the max we can give you. And I said, cool, I'm your guy. So I called my wife, and she's like, hello. And I say, please hold for the next Redwood County Jail Administrator.
Hey.
She laughs and she, whatever. And it was kind of cool. And now fast forward, almost 4 years later, and in all honesty, it was one of the best moves I made, was going to Redwood. Everyone asked me, what's the difference? Is it different? Is it less stress? Well, no, it's not less stress, right? My job is stressful by nature. It's a different stress. I don't have the constant inmate fights that I used to have in Scott County. I always say when I left Scott County in June 24th, tomorrow, 4 years ago tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And from January 1st through the end of May, I used to track all of the codes that were called. There was 50 codes called, 50. I've been in Redwood now 4 years, and I've had 2 fights. It's just a different stress, right? And I couldn't be happier where I'm at. I love it. I walked in and I said, hey, I do this thing with the MSA where I go to this academy and I teach, and then I'll give you guys credit so you can get some officers to come through training. And they're like, yeah, keep doing it. Don't even worry about it. And I haven't heard a peep out of them since. I've been doing, the academy twice a year, plus now we're doing 2D T for T's. So I'm gone 4 weeks out of the year training, and they haven't blinked an eye yet. And I'm so blessed to have that opportunity. I'm super blessed to be sitting with Jason and do these trainings, both of them. Him and I become, I think, fairly good friends. I always say he is my best friend in corrections, and he's one of my best friends in life. I look up to him for a lot. I know him and his wife and his family have been through a ton, as have we, and I lean on him for guidance and kind of, hey, am I supposed to be feeling this way as a man? And for him to say, absolutely, that's what I went through. It's kind of reassuring to me. So I'm super blessed to be able to call him a friend and a mentor. I watch you guys' podcast, and he's something else. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow.
Kind of where I'm at today, right? It's kind of made me who I am. Just family and faith. Growing up, I didn't not believe in God. I just didn't know. Does God exist? I'm like, I have no idea. And after witnessing with my son, you'll be hard pressed to convince me he doesn't. And I'll stand here and shout, till I'm blue in the face that I'm a firm believer in God. I know He's there, and I've seen His miracles. So, family and faith are 2 things that get me through every day. So
That's amazing. So your faith, you said when you were crying in the shower and you said you gave it to God. Had you been, a man of faith at that point, or was it just kind of something? I'm at the end of my rope here. I got nothing else. I'm just gonna give it to God.
and I was literally at the end of my rope. The hardest thing for a man is not to be able to protect his family, right? That's kind of how we're made, how we're bred, how we're built. And I couldn't protect my son. There's nothing I could do. I was at my wit's end. I didn't know if God existed. And I threw a Hail Mary, and I'm like, hey, big guy, if you're up there, here it is.
Right.
Here's my son, quite literally. Um,
Uh-huh.
but let him be a beacon for your hope and for your love. And then
Mhm.
next morning to walk in and his doctors to look at us and say, yeah, he's going to survive. Man, what a blessing.
That's crazy.
It
And
really
what
is.
an what an impact, for anybody else that might be going through something like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't always go that way, and we don't understand why those kind of things have to happen to people to begin with. But for there to be somebody out there going through something and know that there is a hope, like there is a possibility to get through it, and all the stuff that you you mentioned. Well, I had goosebumps like the entire time you were talking. It's just to go
Yeah,
through that and to keep going. It's inspirational
well,
for sure.
it, what are the options? The options are you keep going or you don't. And
Hmm.
for me to not keep going, I can't do that to my family. Who am I to not keep going for them? Look what they've done for me. They've taught me, and I tell my kids, my kids have taught me more than I ever taught them. And that's, I can't, maybe I'm a bad dad, whatever you want to say, right? But I've learned so much more from my kids. Patience, humility, love, kindness, empathy, compassion. You know, it's unbelievable. So there's no way I could not keep going.
Hmm.
We spent, like I said, 169 days in the hospital. Most of it in the cardiovascular intensive care units, the ICU, and there wasn't a day that goes by that we weren't laughing. You know, um, I take that back. There was a couple of days we weren't laughing, but by and
Right.
large, we were laughing, and we got to the point where the nurses were laughing. We would have water fights with the nurses in the hallways, and
Uh,
we races up and down the hallways, and it was just we tried to make the best of a bad situation, right? If you can always laugh, always smile, your day is you're gonna get through your day just fine, right?
hmm.
We're at the lowest of lows, and we're in there laughing, and um, so one quick story from my son.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
prior to his heart transplant, he had another open heart surgery that caused him to have a series of strokes, which is why they gave him 3 days to live. But one of the strokes took his vision. He was completely blind for months. Um, and he still to this day can't really see all that well, but he a little bit. Anyway, we thought he was going to get discharged from the hospital. And we were all super happy, and they did rounds every day where all the doctors would go to every patient, and they would talk about the patient and where they're at and what they're doing and yada yada. And my son wanted to play a practical joke on the doctor's name that did my son's heart transplant was called Dr. MacGyver. If you're over 40, MacGyver is not someone you want working on your kid's heart, right? But he did a very good job. Anyway, so they get to my son's room, and uh, they open the curtain, and my son's standing there naked. My son was 15. He's 6'3", 120, 30 pounds at the time. He's standing there naked, right? And he's like, I'm flashing you guys, so I'm getting out of here. What does he care? And they're like, well, you're not really getting out. We got a couple of things we need to get through. So it's going to be a couple more days, which is kind of deflating. So the next time they came around, we had Nerf gun wars a lot in the hospital where we just shoot each other with Nerf guns and have a good time.
Hmm.
So my son said the next time he comes here, I'm going to shoot him with a Nerf gun. Next time they do rounds, because how dare he not let me out? And so curtain flings open, and there's 6, 7 doctors standing in the hallway, and my son again can't see what he's doing, just pulls a trigger, and it hits the heart surgeon in the nether regions, right? And the doctor never skipped a beat, just kept right on talking. Everybody else was just shocked at what just happened. That's just who we were as a family. We were such practical jokers. The doctor never skipped a beat, just kept right on talking, and then moved on about his day. It was pretty classic to see. It was pretty fun.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Did that just happen?
And doctor never skipped a beat, just kept right on talking and moved on. It was great.
Maybe he went back up to the restroom or something.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh God.
man. So transitioning from from being in a hospital, being with your family like that, how did that affect you as a correctional officer? I think at the time you said you were a training sergeant, so you may not have interacted with inmates a whole lot at that time. But did that experience with your family kind of bring out a more, like you said, your kids make you more patient, more or more loving? I'd have to rewind to see all the things that you said, but did you then display those things to people who were incarcerated a little bit more? You had a little more compassion, and honestly, you seem like that you're that kind of guy to begin with. But did it kind of open up a new perspective for you, or did it flip a switch and do the opposite, where it was like, get on my way. I got to get back to my family because they're what's most important to me, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in that it didn't happen that way. I think I've always been kind of an empathetic person.
Mm,
Right. I've always been a firm believer that inmates are there as punishment, not for punishment. It's not my job to punish you. It's my job to
mm-hmm.
hold you to the rules. And if you break a
Right.
rule, then I'm going to punish you. But I'm not there to be a hard ass and make your day any more miserable than it has to be. Right. Um, that's kind of how I always went about my career. Um, there are people that made a mistake. And I always say the only difference in me and some of the people that are in there, and they got caught. Right. Have I ever had one too many beers and driven? Absolutely, I have. And
Mm,
it's just the way it is. Right. Um, so the only difference is they got caught and I didn't. Right. Um, did it make me flip a switch and say, I need to get out of here. My family's more important? No, not to that extreme. Um, I never really tried to mix home and work. So when I was at work, I never thought I gotta get home to my family. That's the most important thing. It's always in my mind, not the driving force behind my day. Right.
mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
Now, once my day was done, I'm not taking overtime unless you force me. I'm not working a holiday unless you force me. That's my family time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I never went to the extreme of my family is more important, even though they are. My
Right.
family is,
Right.
is more important than doing this job correctly today, and that's not how
Sure.
I looked at it. Um, so yes, my family is absolutely the most important thing to me, but I don't go into work saying my family's more important than you. I never look at that. When I go
Right.
to work, even today, I've got three goals every shift, and my wife hates it when I say this, but I'm going to anyway. My three goals: my staff goes home safe, I go home safe, my inmates are safe, in that order. My staff goes first, then me, then the inmates. And that may not be the best way to look at it, but that's how I go about my day, right? Everything I do when I'm at work is to make sure my staff are safe. They go home safe, cool. I go home safe, cool. Inmates are safe, perfect day. That's all I can ask for.
Mm,
Um, and my wife said, "Why don't you put yourself first?" That's just not who I am. I
mm.
have to make sure my staff goes home first. I look at my staff as extensions of my family. They're like kids to me almost, work
Sure.
kids, if you will. So I put them kind of first, and then I go home safe, and the inmates are safe, and it's a good day for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think as I asked the question, I almost answered it with what you had said previously about your Mount Rushmore of kind of your why. If you know your why, you can kind of get through any how. I've heard that quote before as well.
Yep.
But if you're living for that Mount Rushmore, you also want to live in a way when you're not with them that is still a way that reflects the love that you have for them. Living for that Mount Rushmore is living in a way that is bringing out the best possible version of yourself to be not just for them, but around, other people benefit from that as well. And those inmates, if you keep your family first, you keep your priorities straight, they're going to reap the benefits of that, of you just being a decent human being.
Right.
And, kind of transitioning into, your family is a huge, huge part of who you are and what you are. When you talk about being there for your family and also being 100% at work, what do you do to keep sharp, to be at the top of your game when you are in those moments? Are there different things that you do outside of work, or different things you're studying while you're at work to make sure you're, at the top of your game?
So I guess when I'm at work, how I stay on top of my game, I'm constantly talking to people in our industry, right? I constantly am bouncing questions off other jail administrators in the state, in our region, other instructors, Jason, Glenn, Adam when he was there. I was weekly, we were talking about hey, did you see this? Hey, what would you do in this situation? Hey, what's going on with this? Um, you know, iron sharpens iron, and that's just the way it is, right? So me bouncing off or bouncing questions and comments and scenarios off of other people, um, I stay sharp by surrounding myself with sharpness, and
Mm.
it's even in my everyday life. I try to surround myself with the people that make me better, and that's a very selfish thing to think, right? Who can I put around me to make me better? Um, but when you do that, it's an amazing feeling when you can stand in a room of people and go, man, these guys make me great, and I
Mm.
make them good too, Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts. I'm fortunate. I'm lucky. I'm blessed. It starts with my wife. She's my best friend, and everything I do, I want her by my side. I want her, behind me. I want her, in front of me in certain situations because that's just the way she is too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but sharpening my skills when it comes to daily life, um, I'm trying to emulate the people that I see that I look up to, whether it's my wife, whether it's Jason, whether it's my kids. Um, they all do something that makes me a better person, and I want to take that little bit and I want to keep that with me, right? To make me uh, just that little bit better. If you're 1% better than yesterday, that's all you can ask for, you know.
Amen. Mm-hmm.
So it's not
Love it.
it's not easy. I'll be honest. It's not. There are days, right? There there are days where you slide a little bit, but man, you get back on that horse. You just keep going forward.
I think that's part of it too, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is giving yourself that grace and understanding, like, every day is not going to be perfect. Like, I'm type 1 diabetic, and I spoke with another type 1 diabetic on one of my previous episodes, and she's like, we wear our insulin pumps on our sleeve. We got adversity on our sleeve. We wear it proudly, and we can go into the day thinking, hey, nothing's going to stop me because I got this. I got to wear this all the time. I can get through this. But she's like, then there's days when you're standing at your refrigerator and you're eating food to try to manage your blood sugar levels, and you just sit there and go, God dang it, this sucks. Like,
Yep.
and it's okay. Like, give yourself that grace. Understand, like, you had a bad day. Maybe you made a mistake. As long as you don't stay there, as long as you're not staying within that slump, that, oh man, this sucks, or oh, this day is awful. Like, put it past you, move on to the next one. Give yourself some grace.
And everyone gets in those slumps and those ruts, and sometimes they're longer than a day, and that's okay too. Um, it's just getting to the end of that and digging yourself out and strapping your boots back on a little tighter and trudging forward. Whether we like it or not, people are watching us, and maybe the one thing we do is inspirational to them that day, and that keeps them going forward. I heard a
Hmm.
saying when I first started that a lot of our inmates, the first real role models they have is us as correction staff.
Oh wow,
And I was like, that hit me hard. I was like, man, what?
wow.
How can I be their only role model? And this guy's 50 years old, and I'm a 25 year old rookie. How can I be his role model? And I said, well, because you come into work every day, you strap your boots on, your uniform's pressed, your boots are shined, and you're squared away, and you come in, you do the job the way it's supposed to be done, and they look at you as, man, I want to be like that. How do I get my life straightened out to be even a little bit like that? And it kind
Hmm.
of hit me, you know, that as a I was 30 when I started. As a 30-year-old rookie, I got some 60-year-old guy looking at me going, that guy's got it together. And it's kind of humbling. It really is. So
It's cool how you touched on that. From when you first started, and I guess kind of the last question I have for you. Even myself, I started in corrections a little over 2.5 years ago now, and I was on the road as a police officer and a deputy before that for a little bit. But my goal now is, someday work my way up to be in the shoes that you're in now through, sergeant and the appropriate lanes. I'm an FTO right now and got the use of force stuff going on, so I'm making my way there. Now that you're there, now that you're at the top of the correctional officer game, so to speak, what do your goals look like now, and what does it look like? Because when you first started, you were gung ho for being a jail administrator and captain. Now that you're there, you're kind of like, okay, now what? Or what does it look like for you? How have your goals shifted?
what's next? So my goals have shifted um, a couple of different ways. I still strive to be at the top of my game, right? I still want to. It's a very personal and it's an egotistical thing, I think, and I'm coming to realize that. But I want to become the jail administrator of the year, Minnesota Sheriff Association, right? I want to be recognized
Mm,
as that. Well, how do I achieve that? Because there are so many good JAs in the state that, man, I'm way down the list, right? So every day I try and just be a little bit better. Make my jail a little bit better, make my staff a little better, make our community a little bit better. The reality is I'll probably never achieve that, and that's okay, as long as I'm still striving to be the best, or at least my best version of me.
mm-hmm.
That's all I can really ask for. And then the biggest goal I have right now, and it's no secret, I've told my bosses this, is to retire. I'm at the point in my career. I've been doing this for 19 years. By the time I retire, it'll be 25 years, and I'll have 10 years as an administrator. Um, and at that point, it's time for me to hang up my duty belt and grab my wife by the hand and travel. We're going to travel the world. We've already been all over the place. There's more we need to see. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so my goal, my motivation, um, is retirement, and that sounds probably not the best thing to say, but that's where I'm at in my career. I've got 6 years left, and then I'm going to retire, and maybe I'll get a second career, and maybe I won't. Maybe we'll just travel and
Mm-hmm.
go places we've never been before. Um, I my goal is to make her happy, and every morning wake up and if she has a smile on her face, man, it's a good day. I'm good to go then.
Mm-hmm. Opportunities are endless.
Correct.
Yes, and that's awesome. And it's cool that you put it that way, like it's a goal to retire, as it's almost like an accomplishment for you, rather than some people who have the countdown on their watch, like, oh gosh, I get to get out of here, whoo.
Right.
Maybe you
Right.
do. Maybe you do have a countdown secretly, but the way you worded that, it's almost like, it's not a bad thing, it's not like, oh, finally I can get out of here. It's like, no, I can hang my duty belt, I can hang my hat on this career and be proud of that,
Yep.
and then step into the next adventure that I got going on in my life.
I'm not one, and Jason was the same way. Maybe that's the reason I've kind of seen him do it. He's not one that he's gonna retire on duty and skate through the last 2 3 years. I'm not that
Yeah.
way either. I'm gonna go out being the best that I can still be. 6 years, 7 years from now. Um, so I'm not gonna skate into retirement. I'm gonna go in kicking the doors down and still trying to make our facility the best it can be. Um, so we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time. This is an hour definitely goes by fast, but when you're having a great conversation, it just flies by. But seriously, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and sharing your story and even the personal parts, because it's something that I can learn from too. I get these guests on here for hopefully somebody else to watch, but I selfishly really enjoy these for myself, taking notes and thinking, okay, how can I learn? How can I apply this to my life? And you're one of those guys who, even the few couple days that I got to spend with you up in training, you're just one of those guys like, man, I got to get to know this guy, or at least pick his brain later on. And there's a lot of you guys out there, especially in the career field that you're in. So thank
I
you
I
for real,
appreciate you letting me on here, Bailey. It was super fun. I appreciate it.
Matt Luitjens, everybody.
Stay safe.